Hi everybody, this is Steve from Brass Horse Studios, and in this video I'm going to talk about what might be happening with your PPP or Paycheck Protection Program loan, or your EIDL loan. That's the $10,000 grant, or up to $10,000, or if you're going to get it, maybe, or $1,000 per employee. All the news has changed. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what might be happening behind the scenes there and what you might be able to do even if you have to wait a little bit. So maybe offer at least a little bit of reason and some encouragement for this. So hit that like button, please. It really helps. Subscribe if you want some more to this, and stay tuned. We'll talk about it in just a second. All right, so to understand what might be happening, let me talk about some numbers first. In the United States alone, there's 30.2 million small businesses. Now that's using the Small Business Administration definition of a small business as less than 500 employees. There's 30.2 million of them. Now they provide over 50% of America's workforce, so they're really important. As of yesterday, Friday, April 10th, all the news said, every headline from every slant of news said that 70% of small businesses had applied for some form of Small Business Administration help from the federal government, these programs that have just passed in the CARES Act. So doing the math quickly in my head, that's right at about 21 million small businesses have applied for some form of help. In other words, folks, that's how many forks there are clamoring for a bite of the pie. That $350 billion pie, that's the amount of money that the CARES Act sets aside for small business financial assistance. So think about that. If you only used averages, which isn't realistic because some of those businesses have 499 employees. Some of those businesses have 100 employees. Many of those businesses have one or two. In fact, actually, it's kind of more of a long tail. A whole lot of businesses have one or two, and it gets many fewer have over 100. All of those sole proprietors, all of those independent contractors, all of those folks that are in the gig economy are all sticking their fork in the pie to get some support. They need help. They're trying to get help. They're trying to get support. So if you take just the law of averages and you divide $350 billion by just 21 million, just the part that have already asked for support. That's assuming no one else asked for support, which is pretty unrealistic. What you're going to get is $16,666 and off its string. So $16,700 to round up each. And that's only if no one else applies. That's why you have been hearing this news about the Small Business Administration limiting this assistance to about $15,000 per business. Or you may have heard, it was released by the Massachusetts District of the Small Business Administration. This is where this came from, was an email from the Massachusetts District of the SBA limiting the EIDL support to $1,000 per employee. All right, so what happened to your application? Well, I know a lot of small business owners who have applied for some form of support, and I personally don't know any who have received it yet. Now, last night I was on some forums and I was looking around in some sources, and I saw where some people had said, hey, I got an approval letter and I got confirmation that it's coming. I think I saw a couple people who said that they saw it processing in their online banking thing, which means it was in the process of being deposited. But I personally do not know of anybody who has actually had their hands on the money in the wild yet. So here's what happened. The federal government passed the CARES Act when President Trump signed it into law on March 27th. It was first introduced on March 19th, I believe, which means that's 8 days. In record time, that passed. Now that's great. But as Mike Tyson has said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So that Act placed the execution and governance of the CARES Act, the portions pertaining to small business support, in the hands of the language in the Act says the administration. And that first appears in section 1101, paragraph 1, the administration, and it defines them as the Small Business Administration. The Small Business Administration has 10 regional offices around the country and 110 district offices around the country. Okay, so we've got one here in my community. And all of those district offices are liaising with the regional offices who are liaising with the federal government. Now, who's talking to those district offices? Banks. Banks are looking for guidance. Small banks, community banks, credit unions are looking for guidance. The big banks are going straight to the Treasury and asking, hey, what do we do? The Bank of America, Fifth Third, Chase, places like that. So all of these banks are liaising with these SBA district offices. How do we execute this in real life? Right? How do we do it? How do we make it happen? That is exactly what the CARES Act dictates. The CARES Act dictates that it is going to be the Small Business Administration that executes the act, the CARES Act. They're the ones that are going to do it. In other words, banks can't make up their own mind and act on their own accord without guidance and the authority of the SBA. So those offices, those Small Business Administration offices are liaising with 4,592 FDIC insured commercial lending banks in the United States. That's not counting their branches. That's just the commercial lending companies that are banks. All told, there are over 50,000 locations of small and regional banks in the United States. We're not talking about Bank of America locations or Wells Fargo locations or any of the big players. We're talking about small regional banks where a lot of small town America has their relationships with a lender. And so they're in those banks and they're trying to get answers and they're trying to make applications, and there's 50,000 of those. So granted, some of those banks are Bank of America and Wells Fargo and things like that, and they have a certain percentage of the market share, if you will, of the total loan amounts that are going out. You know, the ratios vary. I've heard that they account for anywhere from 30 to 40% of the total loan amount that's going out. The big banks, the big players, Bank of America, 10% of the applications they account for. You got Wells Fargo, you got Chase, you got all these big banks. But many small business entrepreneurs like yourself probably are applying through their small community banks through which they have relationships. And many small business owners are trying to increase their success rate or decrease their wait time by applying to more than one. So they're applying to multiple sources so that they could take the first offer that comes in and kind of hurry the process. That's not a bad idea. It's a good idea. The only way I know how to describe this is like this. It's like being the first house in your neighborhood, the first house that was built in your neighborhood one year, and on Halloween you buy one bag of candy and 2 or 3 kids come by and get candy, and at the end of the night there's plenty left over for you and your family to eat from. And the next year your entire community is built out. Your entire housing development is built out, and it is a jam-packed, completely rockin' community with full of kids, and all their friends and their family members' kids come over to have big Halloween parties and go trick-or-treating because your place rocks. And then there's that one family down the road, you know, that has like 12 kids, and they all double fist their way in there, and you had 2 bags of candy that year. In other words, you ran out by 6:30. It was still daylight outside, and you're sending mom or you're sending somebody out to try to go scramble and get some more because you don't want to be that house on the block. That's what's happening to these small banks that had processes in place to accommodate the number of loans they typically get. And it's extremely hard in slow-moving institutions like the government, Small Business Administration, and banks, one of the most traditional institutions in the United States, to just change their processes of handling loans and money. They don't just, call up reserves and triple the amount of people sitting there in the bank ready to take your application, having trained them to handle legal issues like loans. It doesn't happen like that. These banks just didn't have the systems in place. The SBA didn't even have the systems in place through its district offices for a bill that passed in 8 days to launch. They gave them 1 week to launch till Friday, April 3rd. That's what's happening. I'm not trying to tell you that you're not frustrated. You're frustrated. I know you're frustrated. But the bottom line is that while the federal government had a good act with great intentions, there wasn't sufficient time for slow-moving bureaucracies to make logistical and operational plans to execute it. So 1 week's lead time just wasn't enough. The machine is overheating and it's bogging down, and the cogs aren't going any faster than they were the week before this act passed, and they knew they were going to have to do this thing. It's more like flooding an engine with too much gas, because they didn't make the engine bigger or add turbos. They just poured in more gas, which is liquidity. They just poured in more money and said, go faster, but it doesn't work that way. So it turned into quite a cluster show. Whoops-a-daisy. So what's going to happen to your loan application, and what could or should you do? Well, one of a few different things. Number one, it will get processed, and you're in line, and you may not know how close you are. And let's hope that that is the situation for you and your business. In this case, then, it's a waiting game. And the degree to which you need the money isn't the factor that determines how fast they're going, because the assumption is every small business who says I need the money needs the money equally bad. Equally as bad? Badly? Pretty badly? Everybody needs it the same way. All right? The assumption is that everyone needs it fast. The bank is overwhelmed. The second option is that the bank is overwhelmed, and that potentially the people in that bank where you're banking with, I mean, they could have gotten sick, they could be shorthanded, and it could take weeks to process that. And we hope that's not the case, but it could be the case. And lastly, and I think that this is actually a significant possibility, that another act will pass, or more support is going to pass. There was a vote in Congress last week that actually hit the floor because they were fighting over it. There's already been attempts to provide more money to this act. And so again, that just goes into that there's a waiting game, and it's going to take time. And I know that the act said 3 days, and people are very frustrated and very angry about that. But the act said something that the system, the pipeline, wasn't built to do. And there just wasn't any chance for success at getting that through in that way. I sat there in one day, and no kidding, and this happened during a video that I made last week. And in one day of looking at the SBA's website, it had changed 3 times. So what can you do? Well, the first thing is wait. And I want you to hear me. I am not saying that lightly, and I'm not saying that flippantly, because it is a painful wait. You're a business owner. This is your identity. These are your employees. These are people you care about. This is something that you've lost sleep over probably for years. This is your baby, and waiting just is the most excruciatingly painful thing that you've ever done. It's your life and your livelihood. So I want you to know I am not saying this flippantly or carelessly. If it is what you need to do right now, then you need to start thinking about and accepting that it's a waiting game, and now from here on, you need to focus on some things that maybe you can begin to influence. So I've got a video about how to manage employees that are working at home. I've got another video that's about to hit about what you could be doing while you're waiting for a loan. And maybe subscribe now and hit those bells so that you'll see those things launch, and just better yourself as a small business owner and start focusing on some things that you can control that I've talked about in those videos. A second thing you can do is apply at multiple sources. So perhaps you want to consider an online lender like Cabbage or Lindio or something like that. I'm not sponsored by any of those. I can't vouch for their services or their abilities, but they're out there and they are advertising that they're handling these loans. So maybe you want to go an online route and see if that works or how that works compared to your traditional route. And leave comments down below. Tell me how it went. Third thing you can do is send periodic, very kindly and professionally worded emails to the representatives you've already worked with in these agencies. Don't use threats, don't use vulgarity, there's no point in that. There's no point in sounding like you're the only one of their clients that matters. They are overwhelmed. Listen, they're inundated. These folks in these banks, lending officers, and even these, God love them, these representatives in the SBA, these grassroots folks that work in these regional offices, those are our financial healthcare workers. And they are doing everything they can. And I think the analogy is good. They are like the doctors and nurses in a healthcare system that wasn't designed to accommodate this crisis. And they're doing the best they can with what they've got. Send them a kindly worded email. I'm checking in. How are things? Is there anything you can tell me? Do you know how long it'll be? And make that professional and kind, and thank them for their hard work. They'll remember that the next time you need to go get a loan for regular stuff when this is all turned around. All right. Similarly, contact your creditors, your landlord, other people that you may owe some money to or be making some regular bill payments to. and inform them and ensure them that you are doing the very best you can to shore up your firm's financial resources to be able to pay them, if not on time, as early as you possibly can, that you don't take this lightly, and that you want to continue a good relationship with them, and that you fully intend to do that as soon as you have this stuff sorted out. Chances are they're in the same boat, and you probably aren't the only small business owner that they're hearing from. So write them a kindly, professionally worded email letting them know that you're working hard to do that. And then lastly, and this is the worst part of it, but if you need to and if you can, consider credit cards as a bridge loan, but be very, very careful how far you extend yourself for those, because you got to pay them back, and they're going to be really, really, really high interest rate. Think very long and hard about doing that, but if it is a resource, it is a resource, especially if you're getting some good news maybe from your bank lender that you got good numbers and the numbers were right and you're going to get the money. That'll help you feel a little more assured if you go ahead and make that expense. Listen, these are painful times. I want to be a resource for you. I don't get anything for this. Please like this video. It's important to like it. If this was a resource for you, subscribe to the channel, and I'll continue to produce things that hopefully can help you. Tell me things that maybe you'd like researched. If I can hear those things, tell me about success stories. Tell me things that have worked for you. Would love to learn more about that, all right? So like, subscribe, and share. If this has been useful, share it in your circles, your business circles, with other business owners, things like that could help. All right, thanks so much. Really appreciate you tuning in and watching these videos. So until the next video, I hope you're doing well.